The Three Little Men in the Woods. There was a man whose wife died, and a woman whose husband died, and the man had a daughter, and the woman had a daughter as well. The girls knew each other and went for walks together, and afterward they went to the woman's house. Then she said to the man's daughter, "Listen, tell your father I want to marry him. Then you shall wash yourself in milk every morning and drink wine. But my daughter shall wash herself in water and drink water." The girl went home and told her father what the woman had said. The man said, "What shall I do? Marriage is a joy and also a torment." Finally, because he could not make up his mind, he took off his boot and said, "Take this boot, it has a hole in the sole, go up to the attic, hang it on the big nail, and then pour water into it. If it holds the water, then I will marry again, but if it leaks, then I will not." The girl did as she was told, but the water drew the hole together, and the boot filled to the brim. She told her father how it had turned out. Then he went up himself, and when he saw that it was true, he went to the widow and wooed her, and the wedding was held. The next morning, when the two girls got up, there was milk for the man's daughter to wash in and wine for her to drink, but there was water for the woman's daughter to wash in and water for her to drink. On the second morning, there was water for the man's daughter to wash in and water for her to drink, just as there was for the woman's daughter. And on the third morning there was water for the man's daughter to wash in, and water for her to drink, and milk for the woman's daughter to wash in, and wine for her to drink, and that's how it stayed. The woman became very hostile toward her stepdaughter, and did not know how she could make things worse for her from one day to the next. She was also jealous because her stepdaughter was beautiful and lovely, but her own daughter was ugly and repulsive. One day in winter, when it was freezing hard and the mountains and valleys were covered in snow, the woman made a dress of paper, called the girl, and said, "Put on this dress, go out into the woods and fetch me a basket full of strawberries. I have a craving for them." "Oh, dear God," said the girl, "strawberries don't grow in winter. The earth is frozen, and the snow has covered everything. And why should I go in this paper dress? It's so cold outside that one's breath freezes. The wind will blow right through it, and the thorns will tear it off my body." "Do you dare to talk back to me?" said the stepmother. "Go, and don't let me see you again until you have the basket full of strawberries." Then she gave her a little piece of hard bread and said, "You can eat this during the day," and thought, "Outside she will freeze and starve and never come before my eyes again." The girl was obedient, put on the paper dress, and went out with the basket. There was nothing but snow far and wide, and not a single green blade was to be seen. When she entered the woods, she saw a small house from which 3 little dwarfs were peeking out. She wished them good day and knocked modestly at the door. They called out to her to come in, and she went into the room and sat down on the bench by the stove to warm herself and eat her breakfast. The little dwarf said, "Give us some of it too." "Gladly," she said, divided her little piece of bread in 2, and gave them half. Then they asked, "Why are you running around in the woods in your thin little dress in wintertime?" "Oh," she answered, "I am supposed to look for a basket of strawberries, and am not allowed to go home until I bring it with me." When she had eaten her bread, they gave her a broom and said, "Sweep the snow away from the back door with it." But when she went outside, the little men said to one another, "What shall we give her because she is so kind and good and has shared her bread with us?" Then the first one said, "Oh, yea! I will give her that she becomes prettier every day." The second said, "I will give her that gold coins fall from her mouth every time she speaks a word." The third said, "Mommy yummy one. I will give her that a king comes and takes her as his wife." The girl did as the little dwarfs had said, swept the snow away from the back of the little house with the broom, and what do you think she found? Nothing but ripe strawberries that came dark red out of the snow. In her joy, she quickly filled her basket, thanked the little men, shook hands with each one, and ran home to bring her stepmother what she had desired. As she entered and said, "Good evening," a gold coin immediately fell from her mouth. Then she told what had happened to her in the woods, but with every word she spoke, gold coins fell from her mouth, so that soon the whole room was covered with them. "Just look at the arrogance," cried the stepsister, "throwing money around like that." But secretly she was jealous and also wanted to go into the woods to look for strawberries. The mother said, "No, my dear little daughter, it is too cold, you could freeze to death." But because she gave her no peace, she finally gave in, sewed her a magnificent fur coat that she had to put on, and gave her butter, bread, and cake to take with her. The girl went into the woods and straight to the little house. The 3 little dwarfs were peeking out again, but she did not greet them, and without looking at them or greeting them, she stumbled into the room, sat down by the stove, and began to eat her butter, bread, and cake. "Give us some of it," cried the little ones. But she answered, "It's not enough for me, how can I give any to others?" When she had finished eating, they said, "There's a broom for you, sweep outside in front of the back door for us." "Oh, sweep for yourselves," she answered. "I am not your maid." As she saw that they did not want to give her anything, she went out the door. Then the little men said to one another, "What shall we give her because she is so rude and has a wicked, envious heart that begrudges everything to everyone?" The first one said, "I will give her that she becomes uglier every day." The second said, "I will give her that a toad jumps out of her mouth with every word she speaks." The third said, "I will give her that she dies a miserable death." The girl looked for strawberries outside, but when she found none, she went home sullenly. And when she opened her mouth and wanted to tell her mother what had happened to her in the woods, a toad jumped out of her mouth with every word, so that everyone was disgusted by her. Now the stepmother was even angrier and thought only of how she could cause the man's daughter all kinds of heartache, whose beauty grew greater every day. Finally, she took a pot, put it on the fire, and boiled yarn in it. When it was boiled, she hung it on the poor girl's shoulder and gave her an axe to go to the frozen river, chop a hole in the ice, and rinse the yarn. She was obedient, went there, and hacked a hole in the ice, and while she was in the middle of hacking, a magnificent carriage came driving up, in which the king sat. The carriage stopped, and the king asked, "My child, who are you, and what are you doing there?" "I am a poor girl and am rinsing yarn." Then the king felt pity, and when he saw how beautiful she was, he said, "Will you come with me?" "Oh yes, with all my heart," she answered, for she was glad to get away from her mother and sister. So she got into the carriage and drove away with the king, and when they arrived at his castle, the wedding was celebrated with great splendor, as the little men had given to the girl. After a year, the young queen gave birth to a son, and when the stepmother heard of the great happiness, she came to the castle with her daughter, pretending to pay a visit. But when the king once went out, and no one else was present, the wicked woman seized the queen by the head, and her daughter seized her by the feet, lifted her out of the bed, and threw her out the window into the stream flowing by. Then her ugly daughter lay down in the bed, and the old woman covered her up to her head. When the king came back and wanted to speak to his wife, the old woman said, "Hush, hush, that won't do now. She is in a heavy sweat. You must let her rest today." The king thought nothing bad of it, and only came back the next morning. And when he spoke to his wife and she answered him, a toad jumped out with every word, whereas a gold coin used to fall out. Then he asked what that was, but the old woman said she had gotten it from the heavy sweat, and it would go away again. But in the night the scullery boy saw how a duck swam up the gutter, and it said, "King, what are you doing? Are you sleeping or awake?" And when he gave no answer, it said, "A ping. What are my guests doing?" Then the scullery boy answered, "They are sleeping fast." It asked further, "What is my little child doing?" He answered, "It is sleeping fine in its cradle." Then it went upstairs in the queen's form, gave it something to drink, shook its little bed, covered it up, and swam away as a duck down the gutter. So it came for 2 nights. On the third it said to the scullery boy, "Go and tell the king to take his sword and swing it 3 times over me on the threshold." Then the scullery boy ran and told the king, who came with his sword and swung it 3 times over the spirit, and at the 3rd time his wife stood before him, fresh, alive, and healthy, as she had been before. Now the king was overjoyed, but he kept the queen hidden in a chamber until Sunday, when the child was to be baptized. And when it was baptized, he said, "What does a person deserve who takes another out of bed and throws them into the water?" "Nothing better," answered the old woman, "than to be put in a barrel studded with nails and rolled down the mountain into the water." Then the king said, "You have pronounced your own sentence," had such a barrel fetched, and the old woman and her daughter were put into it. Then the bottom was nailed shut, and the barrel was rolled down the mountain until it rolled into the river.
Thank you for listening. If you like our stories, please like and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.